Hello, everybody. Welcome into another episode of Bolt Breakdowns here on the Guilty as Charged podcast YouTube channel. My name is Alex, as always, here to talk about a Chargers 25-10 dominant win over the Steelers on Sunday Night Football to get to 7-3, to get to an 81% chance now on NFL Next Gen Stats to make the playoffs. A shorthanded effort, no Slater, no Alt. No Hampton. We can go through the whole list of injuries, but didn't matter. The Chargers showed up in prime time when their best was needed. So we'll talk about everything and get into offense, defense, what needs to be better, as we do every week. But I think the natural place to start was with this guy, Keenan Allen, who put himself atop the Chargers leaderboard with 956 receptions. Beat Gates' record with 955, and now stands alone at the top of the leaderboard. A funny way to get there with the pop pass that he suggested to Jim Harbaugh and Greg Roman to call for him, which I thought was funny, and also that Jim Harbaugh and Greg Roman obliged given the situation. So I thought that was a funny admission by Keenan in the post-game press conference. But in all seriousness, there is really, other than Phillip Rivers and Justin Herbert, you talk about the last 15 years of Chargers football, there's no one who means more to that time period than Keenan Allen. And obviously there was a time when he got traded to the Bears, and I thought the reaction of most was he's never going to play here again. He's probably going to finish his career in Chicago. Maybe he'll play a couple more years and then he'll be done. And it would have always felt weird, I think, if it had ended the way that it looked like it was going to end. And so, the whole story of how I bought this jersey was I was with Steven at the team store. I bet this was back before 2024 training camp, and they were selling Keenan and Eckler jerseys for 60-70% off the rack, and we're basically trying to just clear them out of there. And I did not have the foresight that Keenan would one day be back, but I wanted to pay tribute at that time to a guy who obviously is Chargers legend through and through. Even if he had never come back, gave 11 great years here, yada yada, so on and so forth. But for him to come back, just feels right. And I think there's also a piece of this where he has been a real veteran leader for this team. Obviously, that gets talked about a lot with a lot of the older guys who are on the team and are captains and all that. But I think for Keenan to play, the 80-90% of the snaps he was playing early in the season to be then reduced to like 30 or 40 when Trey Harris and Oronde Gadsden started popping up and, popping off more so in the snap counts and how they're being used on the field. Keenan, never took any issue with it and was like, hey, my role's my role and I'm going to play it. I'm going to be on that field when you still need that third down. I'm still going to get to that marker, regardless of how I'm being used in the context of the offense. And I don't think he gets enough credit for something like that as well, even though it's a more basic thing to talk about. But yeah, the story behind the pop pass was great. And just to do it at home too. There was a huge debate last week when it looked like he could have 6, 7, 8 catches against the Titans. Should he do it in Tennessee? Should he do it at SoFi? And it was nice to get that moment with the fans. Steven was at the game and he was messaging us like, fuck, why aren't they throwing the ball to Keenan? They should throw the ball to Keenan. And he finally got the moment at the end of the game when, luckily, a lot of the Steelers fans had cleared out by then, and it was just Chargers fans in the building celebrating what it was a great moment for Keenan Allen. So he's first in receptions. He's second in yards, I think, behind Gates by about 800. So that's another record we could have on the brink for next year should Keenan return. He's now third, I think, in touchdowns still. So, again, the greatest wide receiver in Chargers history. It's nice of him to get that moment, and I don't know how the rest of the year is going to play out, right? In terms of what this Chargers team's final destiny is. But regardless, I think if this is the last year for Keenan Allen as a Charger, or in the NFL in general, it's nice to see him get this moment. If he comes back next year, great. If he plays for 2 more years, awesome. But it was nice to see him, knowing his age, knowing the stage of his career that he's in, and knowing the possibilities with every NFL player who is over 30, right? And what they could do with their career. It was nice to see him get that moment, certainly in front of the fans. As Justin Herbert said, post game, no one more deserving. And so, shout out to Keenan Allen, the greatest wide receiver in Chargers history. Let's get into the offense now. I think this was a game where I was very troubled throughout the week because I kept having thoughts in my head of just like, how stubborn is Greg Roman going to be? Because I felt like really outside of the Miami game, I don't think there's been consistent enough use of the quick game. We're just, going to get the ball out as fast as possible. And I felt like the path to beating the Steelers team in a way is what Joe Flacco did on Thursday Night Football a couple of weeks ago, where, hey, I'm going to get to the top of my 3-step drop, and I'm getting that ball out of there, right? Like, to me, this secondary, that I think played well for the Steelers today is generally gettable. You just have to keep Herbert alive on plays and not allow too many back-breaking sacks. I think Herbert ended up taking up 5. God, I don't even want to know what the pressure numbers are. I'm sure they're pretty bad. The PFF numbers to this point are not out yet. But I thought Roman from the jump, hey, I'm going to throw a little out to Trey Harris here. I'm going to throw a little screen for QJ. I'm going to, bring in Darius Davis, and he's going to have a positive, 6-yard run and then get suplexed. But still, positive play. I felt like he just had a more consistent understanding of the circumstances in this game and, didn't try to be cute with what the Chargers were doing. It was, hey, let's get completions. Let's get some, let's get the run game going. We'll talk about Kimani in a second. Ladd obviously winning matchups one-on-one and doing his thing as well. But I felt like this was a much more well-constructed game plan from Greg Roman, kind of like the Miami game in terms of what this Chargers team needs to do to survive. And as Daniel Popper wrote, like I do think that the ceiling, as far as like Super Bowl playoff aspirations for this team is, as he put it, caved in this year, based on the fact that you're not going to have Alton Slater in the playoffs. But I think this game, at the very least, was a blueprint of kind of what you can do more efficiently going forward. Now, like if someone looked at the raw numbers for this game, they averaged 24 yards a drive. It's like it's not going to get it done all the time, and obviously they're benefited by the defensive performance tonight. Rodgers was a mess, so you take that to some extent with a grain of salt when teams like the Eagles and the Chiefs and the Broncos and all the teams they have coming down the stretch at some point. But I did really feel like this was a very solid effort by Roman in terms of things to build on. Maybe Trevor Penning gets in lineup and you can swap him out with Deculus. Maybe you can, make little changes in the margins here or there. But I think this is kind of what the game plan needs to be going forward. And so I think this was at least a start to getting the Chargers where they need to be going forward from a Roman standpoint. Justin Herbert, pretty good tonight. He had his one mandatory, almost threw the worst pick of my life when he stared down Keenan Allen in the first quarter. Pretty rough to watch that one. But after that, just like the Titans game, like the Vikings game before that, he got his mandatory almost interception / pick six out of the way and then started playing some Really good ball, settled in, insane throw on the all-22 angle if you do get a chance to watch it too. Ladd McConkey on the 58-yard run that put the Chargers and set them up well. Got chased down by Jalen Ramsey though, so Unk still got it in that regard. But shout out to Justin Herbert again for also, like we just said with Roman, understanding the game plan, understanding what he needs to do to be able to put this team, as currently constructed, in a position to win. So I thought this was a better game for Herbert as it went through the first, second, third, fourth quarter. Once we got past the first, I felt like he settled in a little bit. He was under duress all night, but again, Justin Herbert, no questions to be asked of him. Did I think this was like the most amazing game from him? No, but I did think he had a very good diagnosis of what he was supposed to do in this game and took advantage when the chances were there. Run game. Kimani Vidal had finished with 25 carries for 95 yards, 3.8, and a catch, I think, of 13 yards. He is one of 4 Chargers going back the last, since 2015, I think now, to have 3 games of 100-plus scrimmage yards in a season. That includes J.K. Dobbins, that includes Eckler, that includes Gordon, and now includes Kimani Vidal. And, I thought it was a pretty rough game, all things considered, against Tennessee last week after he had the high against the Vikings. So it's been a little up and down for Kimani from game to game. But I thought when he sees the hole, he's been, very good about hitting it. And I thought his vision in this one got better as the game went on. And he had some really, really good runs on tape. That one where he cut back and nearly ran it in for a touchdown, then runs it in for the touchdown the next play. That was a great one. And I thought he had a couple good runs where he was just, following where his blockers gave him, was crushing holes. A nice misdirection one, I think he got, might have been the play where Darius Slay got injured, unfortunately. But I thought he had a really nice run on that play in particular. And so, again, we keep kind of saying this every week, but no Marion Hampton, no Najee Harris, no Hassan Haskins, no tackles, really, with this team. And yet, like Justin Herbert, Kimani keeps finding ways to kind of get it done. And he, like Geno Smith says, they wrote me off, but I didn't write back, though. He was a guy that got cut, and it was, kind of over for him, as a Charger, barring getting this role and this opportunity on the practice squad. And he's made the most of it. I haven't even actually looked at what his numbers for the season are. 404 yards, 2 touchdowns, averaging 4.5 yards per carry. Has a receiving touchdown in there as well. So great performance tonight by Mr. Vidal. And Herbert had, did not cross his over-under 25.5 rushing yards, which I really thought he was going to crack today. Not that I placed a bet on there or anything. That gambling's illegal, of course. But I thought he had a nice couple runs to keep plays alive and all that kind of stuff, as he usually does. Jared Patterson got 1 carry in this game, so again, this was very much a we're going to ride Kimani until the wheels fall off kind of game, which, still going back to the trade deadline, it probably doesn't matter as much with Hampton coming back next week, but I wouldn't have hated a trade for a running back still. But again, if they think Hampton's going to be able to be 100%, I get why they didn't do it, but I also don't want to run Kimani into the ground this much, but that's at least the status quo for one more week. But very solid performance by Mr. Vidal, and solid performance by the run blockers as well. I thought Becton early on looked pretty good, and it was nice he got through this game in one piece. The pass blocking from everyone is a different story for another day, obviously, in terms of protection, but I thought they all generally did pretty good job at run blocking, all things considered. Receiving, Ladd McConkey, really since week 6 was struggling early in the year. His stats since week 6 are 30 catches, 418 yards, and 3 touchdowns off the back of this 4-catch, 107-yard, 1 touchdown. And he cracks another big explosive play again on the throw from Herbert that I mentioned earlier. So, again, he's kind of reasserted himself as the number 1 wide receiver in this room. It's been a questionable couple weeks for QJ, in my opinion. I thought he played pretty well against the Titans last week, but has certainly cooled off over the last month in terms of the momentum going back to Ladd McConkey. And I think as a result of not having Joe Alt, frankly, a lot of this offense is going to have to work through Ladd McConkey because you're just not going to have the margin of error. You're not going to have the ability to kind of wait for that QJ deep shot to open up like it was more so earlier in the year with the pass protection. So I think Ladd, let me see what his stats are right now. I think he is at 631 yards, 51 catches, 4 touchdowns. Like, I legitimately think Ladd could be over like 1,200 yards by the time the season's done. I don't think that's like a terribly lofty goal for him at this point. If he puts up another 600 or so yards in the last 7 games or so here, I think that's something where the offense, because of how much the Chargers are going to have to rely on the quick game and Herbert getting it out in less than 2 seconds, really, a lot of it, I think, will be funneled through Ladd. QJ had a drop, not as impactful, but again, good at doing the short stuff, I think. We talked about Keenan a lot earlier. Nice to see him get the record. Kimani, 1 catch for 13 yards. Arande Gadsden, I did not think this was his best game, particularly early on, but got better as the game went on prior to his knee injury, which we'll talk about in a second. A little bit of a weird start to this game, though, for him, where he he got to the end zone and like kind of didn't turn around properly for the ball, had 2 weird drops. So obviously, as a lead Arande guy, if you're in the GAC Discord, I get added every fucking time that Kimani or Arande don't do something like amazingly well. And I opened my phone into the game day chat and I had 3 mentions when Arande dropped those 2 passes or whatever. So, but again, when Kimani does something great, I don't get added at all. But when Arande has a stinker like he did today, then I get people's complaints. So, people are a fickle bunch to please, I think is how I would put that. But, we'll have to see what the results of his MRI are. Adam Schefter of ESPN did say that he is getting an MRI today. He was seen wearing a kind of soft brace, not something like super hard on his knee, but was seen wearing kind of a loose, like almost sleeve-like thing after the game. I kind of speculated, and again, this is just speculation, that it looks kind of like a bone bruise to me, possible like ligament sprain, stuff like that we could be talking about. I do not think this is like, worst case scenario, like ACL, any of those kinds of knee injuries. And I think the MRI would be more to see the extent of any ligament, sprains or tears that you can not that I think he tore a ligament, but the extent of any damage, like particularly if it was a bone bruise or something like that. So I think Arande would be okay, but if he had to miss 1 game, miss 2 games, I wouldn't be stunned by that, I guess, and that opens the door for Disley to return. But hopefully everything's good with Arande and he can play this week against the Jaguars in the best case scenario. Tucker Fisk got involved in the receiving action. It was funny when Collinsworth was talking about this in the broadcast. They're like, yeah, like you got to use those tight ends / fullbacks and get them involved in the offense so people don't completely forget to cover them. I thought that was pretty funny. Trey Harris, 2 catches for 4 yards. Again, kind of a little bit of a decoy game for him, I would say, just because the Chargers weren't able to uncork the deep ball. So most of his targets he was going to get were like those short space targets. I guess Darius Davis was not a handoff, but rather kind of a similar pop pass that they did with Keenan Allen where, he picked up a couple yards and then just got suplexed. But hey, shout out to him for getting involved in any way that he can. I think that summarizes most of my thoughts on the offense. The offensive line is probably kind of still a mess, all things considered. But I think they did what they had to do to survive in this game, and we'll see if there are any changes going through. If Trevor Penning gets more in the system, does he replace Deculus and all that kind of stuff that we'll have to follow going forward. But I think for what the purposes of this game was in terms of what Herbert, Roman, and Kimani could control, they controlled fairly well in this game. So shout out to the offense. Let's talk about the defense, which I think this was a really good Jesse Minter game. Obviously, any game in which the opponent scores 10 points or fewer is probably going to be referred to as a Jesse Minter game. But I really did feel like he kind of was like, hey, we're going to take DK Metcalf away, beat us any other way. And I think ultimately at the end of the game, DK Metcalf had 3 catches for 35 yards. Roman Wilson, 2 catches for 35. Jalen Warren had a couple here and there, and I think Darnell Washington had 1 catch. Other than that, the Chargers were kind of lights out as a defense, and I really think the pressure was able to get there to Rodgers pretty consistently. Thule getting in there with some sacks and pressures. I thought Owe, even though he didn't register a sack, had a really nice pressure early on in that game. Khalil Mack, obviously doing Khalil Mack things with registering a sack himself, setting the edge really well early on in that game as far as run defense was concerned as well. So I think everyone really came to play as far as this defense was concerned. Not that they racked up a ton of sacks on Rodgers per se, but Bud Dupree also got donated a sack. I forgot about that looking at the stat sheet right now. Aaron Rodgers, in addition to giving RJ Mickens a freebie, also was like, hey, let's give Bud Dupree a little gift from his former team in the Steelers. So yeah, I thought that was kind of a funny moment in the game for Bud Dupree to get that sack. And then Jim Harbaugh goes, Bud Dupree, game ball! And then I'm like, oh, yeah, he did a bunch tonight. But, that's a conversation for another day. But, really, I think Aaron Rodgers was more worse than the defense was good. But I still do think from a core, everyone was disciplined, and forced Rodgers into some of these tougher throws, forced Rodgers to be out of his comfort zone. Clearly, as kind of a 41-year-old Rodgers, not able to move particularly well, as we saw tonight. If you get him outside of the pocket a little bit, like it did feel like that's play over, really, and you go to the next rep. Nico Reed came up with a big PBU on a ball Rodgers left a little bit short for Calvin Austin, I think. But I was impressed. I don't know what the final snap count ended up being, but there were a couple plays on tape where like DK Metcalf would be lined up in the slot, and they would have Nico Reed line up against him one-on-one with obviously some like help over the top and stuff like that. But again, that was to me another barometer of how confident Jesse Minter is in Nico Reed, and we've talked about that before, obviously off of the back of his preseason performance and some of the stuff that he'd been doing. Looking at some of the other stats from tonight, Dante Jackson comes up with, I believe, an interception. The Cam Hart, a really, really good stretch from how he's been playing really since the Vikings game. I would say is where he was pretty impressive on Justin Jefferson. Again, another guy who was responsible for DK Metcalf duty, if you will, and shined in his assignment and really everything that he needed to do in this game. So I've been super impressed with Cam Hart over the last month or so, especially in the absence of a Tar Heap still to kind of calm things down on defense. Hopefully he's able to come back next week. Cam Hart of the younger corners that they have. And so, shout out to him for how he's been playing. I thought all things considered, this was a better Derwin game outside of the missed tackle, on Jalen Warren that kind of ended up giving up a big play. Denzel Perriman really set the tone on run defense early on. It felt like, he was coming to take some lives, and they were even talking about it on the broadcast. Like it felt like any run play that was going to Denzel Perriman was running into like a brick wall, and that's how it felt watching it certainly during the game. And again, compared to the run defense, really, I would say he played in the Colts game, but obviously, was not 100% when he came back for that one. But there's been a noticeable difference in how well the Chargers are able to, defend the run with him back. Obviously, we saw that early in this game. We saw that on the goal line stand versus the Titans. We saw that in the Vikings game, right? So, shout out to Denzel with how he's been playing. Delshon Phillips got some mileage on defense in this game, which I didn't expect. R.J. Mickens came up with a big interception. Rodgers, again, in the Christmas spirit, Q-Ron threw him another nice pass. So shout out to Aaron for all that he did for the defense in this game, in addition to the defense obviously making some plays on their own. So Jamari Caldwell, I think, deserves a little bit of a mention as well. He was really penetrating pretty well as a run defender on that one rep they had, I think on the goal line that ended up forcing the Aaron Rodgers safety a couple plays later. So I thought him and Mac were really decisive in getting stuff like that done. So shout out to the defense, man. I thought this was one of the most complete wire-to-wire efforts that we've seen from the defense in quite some time. I think they were obviously helped by the current state of Pittsburgh's offense, but they firmly deserve credit for Minter coming in with the right game plan and everyone pretty much executing without making any big picture mistakes. So shout out to Dante Jackson and R.J. Mickens for coming up with their picks. Special teams. Let's talk about it, because I think it definitely rebounded in the second half, for what it's worth. Cam Dicker starts the game by kicking the ball out of bounds, which, again, you're giving the ball to the Steelers right on the 40-yard line as a result. Not great. And then J.K. Scott shanks a punt. Not great. And then the Chargers opt to kick the ball out of the end zone for a touchback when the Steelers had 12 seconds left and some timeouts, I believe still, which I really questioned as a decision, because I know you don't want to give up the return, but if you give the ball, especially with the Steelers who have a kicker like Boswell who can knock it down from any range, pretty perplexing decision to give them basically like 20 yards in like 10, 11 seconds that they would need for a field goal, and then they could call timeout. I didn't love that call, so I thought it was a very perplexing first half for Ryan Ficken's special teams again. Again, I think things settled down in the second half. A blessing on long field goals, miss or make, to have Josh Harris back, to have him back on punts over Rick Lovato, who again had some really, really ugly snaps before he retired. No, just on him, I think he, when you retire, you realize it's kind of time to go. But it was nice to have Josh Harris back in this game, and this team had definitely missed him for sure. Travion Williams looked kind of good tonight. The stats were not crazy. I think he had 25.5 yards per kick return. He was back there with Darius Davis. They only got 3 cracks at kick returning, I believe. Travion had 2 for 51. Darius Davis had 1 for 25. Darius has been fine. I think real punt returns have been a little so-so with him, but I think he's been okay as a kick returner, all things considered. But that was an interesting wrinkle, just because I didn't love Hassan Haskins as a kick returner, and I think they've been missing a little bit of juice there ever since they had to get Naheem Hines off the roster with cut downs and all of that. But Travion, I think, had a little nice speed, a little nice burst that you would kind of want out of your special teams game. Again, not saying it's going to replicate next game and be perfect, or he's breaking off a touchdown at some point or something. But I thought it was a pretty nice game for him, all things considered. So definitely better special teams game in the second half. Pretty lousy start to the first half on special teams, though. And I think if the Steelers had, again, been in a better position to make them pay on some of those offensive drives where, hey, you let them start at the 40, you shank the punt and let them start in your own territory, those are just things that the Chargers are going to pay for against a much better offensive team who's able to take advantage. And so I do feel like in terms of seeding field position, not great. Um, Mini call to talk about that I didn't love the Chargers. Let me just go back to the play-by-play to make sure I have the details correct here. They opt to take. They were up 15-3 at this point to go up 18-3. They opt to take a Cam Dicker 55-yard field goal on 4th and 2 at the Pittsburgh 37. Dicker misses it off the post, doinks, and so then the Steelers get the ball back. Weren't able to do anything with it. They just, I think, turned it over on downs the very next drive, which, again, pretty solid play by the defense to contain Rodgers there. I didn't love the call by Harbaugh to go for the field goal, which, like, again, the thing that I got on Twitter was like, oh, well, of course you missed it, and so now that's what you say. But the Chargers are one of the top 5 teams in terms of, like, EPA missed by when they decide to kick the field goal instead of go for it. One of the only teams that's more conservative from them from game to game is the Steelers. And I just think, especially when you consider the state of their offense, when you consider the names that they're missing at the tackle spots, when you consider the injuries that they're dealing with, I would like to see them be a little bit. I know they trusted their defense to get this done, and I don't think the Steelers were ever like a real threat. I'd like to see them show a little bit more confidence in the offense, and whether you make that 4th down or not, your defense, has essentially 65 yards to defend until the end zone. Like, plus you're giving up more with the potential miss there in terms of starting field position for the Steelers. So, I don't know. Not to mention you're making a 12-point game, a 15-point game, which, again, in terms of, like, it's different if you're making it, okay, we're up 14 and we're going to make it 17. I didn't love the call there to go 2-possession game to 2-possession game, especially when it didn't really benefit the Chargers very much. But again, if he had made the field goal, are we talking about it as much? Maybe not. But I've always been kind of critical of Jim Harbaugh's rather conservative game management because I do think it'll cost them, and has cost them before in some important spots. But overall, very good game for the coaching staff. Some small nitpicks that I had here or there. I do think they will need more complete efforts going forward against better teams that have less 41-year-old quarterbacks starting for them for sure. But this was a step in the right direction for the Chargers, considering the circumstances that they came with into this game this week. So shout out to everyone for getting it done. Shout out to Keenan Allen, who, again, best wide receiver in Chargers history forever, one of my favorite Chargers and one of the defining players of the last 10, 15 years for this franchise or so. And as always, as someone from the great city of Philadelphia, fuck Pittsburgh, fuck Sidney Crosby, fuck Aaron Rodgers, fuck Big Ben, fuck Evgeny Malkin, fuck everyone. That city is the worst city in Pennsylvania. And I will see you guys next time. Bolt the fuck up!